Thank you. In the course of my legal career and my involvement in politics, I've made the acquaintance of many people who live outside the state of Minnesota. And what I discovered is that most people outside of Minnesota have gotten their information about what Minnesotans are like from watching the motion picture film Fargo. And anybody who has watched Fargo has two distinct impressions of Minnesota. The first is, yeah, sure, you betcha, we all do talk that way. Secondly, anybody who is from outside of Minnesota who watches Fargo obviously draws the conclusion that Minnesotans are extremely inept criminals. Fargo concerns an individual by the name of Jerry Lundegaard, who was the office manager of a car dealership that was run by his wealthy father-in-law. And during the course of the years, Mr. Lundegaard managed to embezzle a sizable sum of money from the car dealership. And at the beginning of the movie, the auditors are there looking over the books and demanding to know where the missing money is. And Mr. Lundegaard concocts an absolutely harebrained scheme to get the money to satisfy the auditors. He hires a couple of rummies to kidnap his wife and then hold her for ransom, get his father-in-law to pay the ransom, split the money with the kidnappers, and use his share to replace the money that he has embezzled. Well, in 2002, a real-life Fargo took place in Minnesota. And this is the story of John Touchek, who is absolutely the apotheosis of an inept Minnesota criminal. In early 2002, John Touchek had it made. He had an absolutely cushy job. He was the chief of police in Lanesboro, Minnesota, a beautiful little tourist town on the Rum River in Fillmore County. It's a place that had virtually no crime. So police chief is just an easy, cushy job. He was well respected in the community, and he was in love. He had a beautiful girlfriend who had a daughter by a previous marriage, and his life couldn't possibly be any better. However, all of a sudden, his girlfriend unceremoniously dumped him, said she wanted nothing more to do with him, get out of her life. And John Touchek was absolutely devastated. And he made up his mind that that he had to do whatever it takes to win his girlfriend's heart back again. And he came up with a scheme that absolutely rivaled the Fargo kidnapping scheme for sheer unadulterated craziness. The 9/11 attack was a very recent memory at the time, and he saw the adulation that was poured on first responders who charged into the burning buildings in New York City to save the people in the building. John Touchek decided that he was going to set his girlfriend's apartment building on fire. And as the flames began to reach her apartment, he would miraculously swoop in and heroically rescue his girlfriend and the daughter. That would make her fall in love with him all over again, and things would be as they were before. Well, the rescue went pretty well, and the fire was set, But just as was in the case of Fargo, everything that could go wrong, in fact, did go wrong. First of all, the fire he set raged out of control and proceeded to burn down half of downtown Lanesboro, including 3 irreplaceable buildings on the National Register of Historic Places. Secondly, just as the conspirators in Fargo were done in by the detective skills of a pregnant Brainerd police chief, so it turned out that the fire chief in Lanesboro was an absolutely excellent arson investigator. And he managed to narrow down the source of the fire to a large dumpster full of cardboard boxes, which had been set on fire and pushed up against the apartment building. Finally, the fire chief found an absolutely impeccable eyewitness that placed Chief Touchek immediately next to the dumpster within seconds of the fire starting. He interrogated Chief Touchek, and in the face of the interrogation, Chief Touchek confessed to having set the fire. Immediate consequences followed. He was fired as police chief. He was promptly charged with multiple felony counts of arson and criminal damage to property. And needless to say, his girlfriend was markedly less impressed by his heroism. So much less impressed that she went to court and obtained a restraining order prohibiting Chief Touchek from having any further contact with it. Chief Touchek went on trial, was found guilty of arson, and sentenced to 72 months in the Minnesota State Prison. I look at the story of John Touchek and say to myself, this is the stuff of which legends are made. John Touchek risked absolutely everything he had in life. His job, his reputation in the community, and his very freedom to win back the heart of a woman he loved. How in love with her did he have to be to undertake such a risk? I have a confession to make. Never in my life have I been so in love with anyone that I would have ever undertaken such a risk. And I bet not a person in this audience has ever been so in love. And then I thought to myself, what must this woman have been like that he would risk so much to get her back? She must have been an absolute goddess. Well, I've always looked at the story of John Touchek and thought to myself, this is something Hollywood should make into a movie. And if not a movie, then certainly a made-for-TV miniseries. And if Hollywood does what it should do to the legend of John Touchek, people will now have 3 impressions of Minnesota. First of all, they'll continue to believe that we talk really funny. Secondly, they will certainly continue to believe that we are terribly inept criminals. And finally, they will believe that we are lovesick fools. Mr. Toastmaster.